name is Todd Kimball. I'll be your MC today. And it's the first Sunday of the month. And with that, we have an encore performance by Pete and Paul Barquettes.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. Little darling, it's been a long, long, lonely winter. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, the smiles returning to their faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's all right. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. It's all right. It's all right.
Pete and Paul Barquettes. Amazing. Thank you so much. Alex Olshansky is a doctoral candidate in the College of Media and Communication at Texas Tech University. He worked for 14 years in the banking industry and left his job as a bank executive to pursue his passion of understanding how science is communicated and interpreted among different stakeholders. He examines how people cognitively process science, misinformation, and conspiracy theories, as well as what factors influence their diffusion through social networks. His work has been published in Politics and the Life Sciences, Media Psychology, Media and Communication, and Media and Religion. He has also received media attention in popular outlets like Axios and Popular Science. Joining us all the way from the liberal, lush oasis of humanism of Lubbock, Texas, Mr. Alex Olshansky.
All right, thank you, Todd, for that kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you all virtually. I'm excited to talk to you about my work in science misinformation and conspiracy theories and pseudoscience and why and how people come to believe these kinds of things. So today I'll talk to you about some of the whys and hows of conspiracy theories. I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the work that I've done in this area, and then we'll kind of pull it out to a broad level and talk about some of the bigger aspects, the whys and hows. So I think it was early on in the pandemic I think it was around March 2020 when I received a message from my dad in my Facebook Messenger chat, and it was a link to a YouTube video. The YouTube video was Plandemic. If you're not familiar with Plandemic, it essentially was a documentary style video that was going around early in the pandemic that claimed that Dr. Anthony Fauci and a cabal of elites in the medical industry purposefully unleashed the coronavirus onto the world in order to profit from vaccine distribution and kill a bunch of people in the process. And so I called up my dad and I said, Pop, why are you sending this to me? I study conspiracy theories. Why are you watching this stuff? This is conspiracy nonsense, right? And so he says to me, he says, I don't know. It's very convincing. She's a doctor. She's a scientist. My dad's Russian, by the way. And so I come to find out that not only did he share this video with me, but he shared it with everyone he knows, everyone in his list of friends on Facebook. And so I think it's safe to say that these days we're having a big problem of communication, of persuasion, of trying to get people to agree on a common shared consensus view of reality and just to agree on basic facts. And now there are many confounders here, right? Politics plays a huge role in this, but I think one of the first things that we should be trying to solve as a society is how we can converge on what is true. And so this is one of the reasons why I try to understand why otherwise smart people like my dad fall for things that are not necessarily so true online. And so I would summarize my research into three kind of big buckets, what I call the 3 Ps of information and misinformation, which are people, processing, and propagating. And so when I refer to people, I'm talking about the individual differences in knowledge, beliefs, values, worldviews, politics, etc., and understanding how these dispositions interact to shape our perceptions of science, information, and misinformation. When I talk about processing, I'm referring to the cognitive and emotional processing of media messages. So what happens in the mind and the body while we're uptaking this kind of information. And so here I focus on the changes in cognition and biology over the course of a message. And then when I refer to propagating, I'm referring to the factors that influence message adoption and diffusion. So again, why do people share this information with everyone they know, right? And so here I apply what's called diffusion of innovations theory to science, information, and misinformation. And so what we've seen is, since the rise of social media, we've seen this proliferation of misinformation online. It's gotten so bad to the point where the World Economic Forum, even back in 2013, described this phenomenon as digital wildfires and a potential threat to our society. And more recently, the World Health Organization described this pandemic of misinformation around COVID-19 as an infodemic. And we know that conspiracy theories are among the drivers of this infodemic. And so we know that conspiracy theories revolve around powerful scientific institutions malevolently deceiving the public for one reason or the other, right? Big Pharma is a classic example, who conspires to withhold medical breakthroughs from the public or lies to the public about the safety and efficacy of vaccines, for example. And famously, NASA has faked its moon landings. And funny enough, this conspiracy theory has recently merged and morphed with a kind of form of biblical literalism and emerged again as a new form of a new flat earth theory, if you will, which kind of popped up online around 2014 and started gaining traction in 2015, 2016. And then they started having their Flat Earth International conferences in 2017, 2018, 2019. And so like many of you, when I first heard about this, I was just kind of dumbfounded. Like, what is a flat earther? What are these people talking about? How does someone become a flat earther? And so I became really intrigued on this topic, and I decided to find out more. And so I attended the first Flat Earth International Conference in Raleigh in November of 2017. And so there I interviewed about 20 flat earthers myself. We had about 40 altogether. And what we found out was that most flat earthers were watching other conspiracy videos on YouTube, like the moon landing hoax videos or Sandy Hook truther videos, before flat earth was recommended to them in their recommendation feed. Many of them described being initially skeptical of the videos. Some were some were dismissive of them. Some actually wanted to click on them to watch them in order to debunk the videos. They said that some of them wanted to create their own videos debunking those videos. So for one reason or the other, they ended up clicking on those videos and went down the proverbial rabbit hole and emerged out the other end as flat earthers. And so that begs the question, right? How do people fall for this kind of stuff? What is happening there? And so this brings me back to my 3 Ps. And here I'm focusing on the people, the individual differences in knowledge, beliefs, values, and worldviews. So I became, again, more interested in this, again, more intrigued. And so I went back to the second Flat Earth International Conference in 2018 in Denver, Colorado. And there I interviewed another 20 flat earthers. And so what I come to find out is that flat earthers are essentially converting to a new community, a new culture, a new identity. And so what we see in the conversion literature are Snow and Macaulay 1984 discussed several empirical indicators of conversion. And this just means, how do we know when someone is actually converted, right? How do we know empirically? One of them, what they described, is called membership status. This is essentially proclaiming your new status as a member of this new group. And here we see one flat earthers describes this membership status. And so they said, I'm truly out as a full-fledged flat earther, only because now I feel I have the ability to back up what I believe. And so I've come out on Facebook about it. I've come out to my family about it, and I just don't care about any of the flack or the rhetoric that's going to come with that. So here we see this flat earther is identifying themselves, proclaiming their new membership status as a full-fledged flat earther. Other empirical indicators are what's called demonstration events. This is essentially where you demonstrate your new identity in public. And the Flat Earth conferences are great examples in themselves of demonstration events, right? Flat earthers from around the globe, pun intended, have joined together in this big event to kind of demonstrate their new identities. But many of them also create and sell their own flat earth art, models, books, poetry, things of that nature. They decorate their license plate, their cars, right? And so these are examples of demonstration events in public, which are similar to what we call performances of selfhood, where we find this also in areas like fandom studies. We also see new similar adopted rhetorical patterns among the flat earth community. So we see these kind of new adopted catchphrases and different rhetoric that they use, like NASA tells us the earth is supposed to be spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, but we don't feel that spin. Water, they say things like water always seeks its level. We've never left a low earth orbit, and that there's no measurable curvature on the horizon. And then they have similar catchphrases like ball theory or flat smacked or ball earther or conspiracy. And so these are similar new adopted rhetorical patterns that are, again, similar among the flat earth community. We also see this sense of emotion that happens during the conversion process. And so here, this flat earther is conveying kind of some of this sense of emotion. And I feel like there's so much here in this one quote that I want to take a minute to unpack it for you. So what they're talking about here is after watching one of the more popular flat earth videos, which is called Eric Dubay's 200 Proofs That the Earth is Not a Spinning Globe. And as you can kind of glean from the title of it, it presents 200 arguments for why the Earth is not a spinning ball. And this is common with many flat earth videos. Is what they'll do is they'll present arguments in such rapid succession that you've made it through several arguments before you've even had a chance to think about whether the first one was correct or not. And so this is, after watching this video, this person is talking about how they felt after getting into just several arguments. They said, right into the very first 10 to 12, you're thinking, wow, I never thought of that. Wow, I never thought of it like that. Oh my gosh, that doesn't add up. Whoa, wait a minute here, back up. And your mind goes 90 million miles per hour, and you don't get sleep because you feel duped and you feel lied to and you feel pissed off. Right. So the first thing I want to kind of point your attention to are these wows and the woes. These kind of convey a sense of surprise, of astonishment, of wonder. And so I just want to flag those for you because that's something that we'll come back to later in the talk. But what we also see is this sense of feeling duped and feeling lied to, right? And that made them angry, pissed off about it. And we also see that this person was ruminating on these ideas, at least for one night or maybe more. They couldn't sleep, right? And so we see this kind of gradual conversion that has with it these emotions, right, that happen over the course of this conversion process. We also find that many flat earthers find and gain a newfound sense of meaning and purpose in the universe through flat earth. So here, one flat earther describes this when they said, when you change your viewpoint from this spinning heliocentric world to a geocentric, us at the center of it, it's all shining down on us. It's all about us. I mean, it's hard to deny that there is some form of creator, that there is purpose. And so this person is describing how after, changing their viewpoint to this flat earth model, it's give them a new sense of meaning because they now understand that they are more important. They are at the center of the universe. It was all created for them, right? And so, and for many of these flat earthers, this adoption of these views really just confirms what they've already believed in the first place. We also see that eventually when flat earthers adopt these views and identify themselves as flat earthers, it culminates in this ultimate coming out of the closet, of the flat earth closet. And so what I find this quite interesting is because many flat earthers are evangelical Christians. And what we see here is that they are kind of adopting or co-opting the rhetoric and the experiences of the LGBTQ community when they talk about coming out of the closet. And so here, this flat earther used this rhetoric when they talked about when they first told their father that they believe the Earth's flat. So they said, when I came out, I was like, yeah, like I kind of think Earth's flat. It was almost like, hey, Dad, I'm gay, right? And so they use this kind of, once they identify themselves, they come out of the proverbial flat Earth closet. And so, and here I come back to this quote I showed you a minute ago, and some of you may have picked up on this, is that this person was also using this kind of rhetoric where they said, I'm truly out as a full-fledged flat earther, and I've come out on Facebook about it, and I've come out to my family about it. So some of the takeaways from this work is that we see similar patterns of first watching flat earth videos on YouTube, many of them through the recommendation feed. We also see this newfound realization of meaning and purpose in the universe through flat earth, and a similar process of a gradual, slow conversion that ultimately culminates in a coming out of the closet or public self-identification. And that flat eartherism is like a new community for these people. It's a new culture and a new identity that they take on for themselves. And what we see is with newer phenomenon like QAnon, we see many of these similar patterns, right? We see them also watching YouTube videos about QAnon, or they're on, threads like Reddit or 8chan, 4chan, those things. But then we also see that many of them gain the sense of meaning and purpose through QAnon, right? So they're working together to take down the cabal of Democrat elite pedophiles, right? This gives them a sense of purpose in the world. And we also see most likely they have a gradual a process of conversion. Many of them didn't become QAnon supporters after the first video that they saw. They most likely ruminated on many of these ideas until they had this kind of public, where we go one, we go all type of public self-identification, coming out as a QAnon member. And we see that they have this kind of new community as well. It's a new kind of culture and a new identity for many of them. So this brings me back again to my other question of who are susceptible to these kinds of ideas. And again, I go back to my 3 Ps. And the first one, again, understanding how dispositions interact to shape our perceptions. So my colleagues and I ran a study using what's called the differential susceptibility to media effects model, which generally says that these dispositional factors, or I'm sorry, dispositional, developmental, and social factors influence the media that we use and consume, which also influence how we respond to that media, which then leads to the ultimate media effects of either believing the information, right, or rejecting the information. And so my colleagues and I, we tested several dispositional factors like people's religiosity, how conspiracy minded they were, so their conspiracy mentality, as well as their level of science knowledge, so their science literacy, and how these factors influenced how they perceived different flat earth videos to be. So we showed them videos arguing for the flat earth using science sounding arguments, some using conspiracy based arguments, and some using religious based arguments. And then we measured their perceptions of how strong the arguments were in these videos, as well as their level of counter arguing. So how much did they internally fight against the incoming information? And then we asked them in the end to rate their level of openness to researching flat earth views. So how willing were they to continue going down that rabbit hole? So we recruited 402 YouTube users to participate in our study. And what we found was that among the different video clips, the flat earth video clips, the ones using the science sounding arguments were seen to have the highest argument strength over and above the conspiracy or the religious arguments. Similarly, with counter arguing, the science arguments were the science sounding videos were counter argued the least among the different videos. And so what we found was that people's conspiracy mentality was associated with increases in perceptions of argument strength, whereas their science literacy, so how much knowledge of science did they have, was associated with decreases in perceptions of argument strength. So they didn't believe those videos were very credible. We found that the video clip influenced the amount of counter arguing. So those who saw the religious clips counter argued the most. And so the media effect, the openness to continue researching flat earth views, we found was conditional on which clip they saw, as well as how conspiracy oriented they were. And that the people with lower science literacy were more influenced by what they perceived to be as strong science sounding arguments. So some of the takeaways from this work are that people with lower science literacy and greater conspiracy mentality are those kinds of people who are more susceptible to flat earth information, at least flat earth videos. and that the science sounding arguments that they use in those videos have the potential to move even people who are not conspiracy theorists, so people who are low in conspiracy mentality. And so if a flat earther, for example, was to read our paper and take our work and modify their videos to only focus on the science sounding arguments, they have the potential to convince more people that way. And so have we made any progress on this front? Well, yes and no. So YouTube has made efforts to adjust their algorithms such that if you were to search flat earth on YouTube today, you would be hard pressed to find actual flat earth videos. You really have to kind of know what you're looking for in order to find videos that are actually arguing for flat earth. Most of what you'll find are things like this from credible sources, debunking flat earth arguments. And so, and I can attest, as someone who studies conspiracy theories and who searches for them all the time in YouTube, I do not get them in my recommendation feed. So there's progress in that front. However, I read some research recently that talked about that since YouTube modified its algorithms, it has reduced the sharing of conspiracy content on YouTube. However, it did increase over on Reddit. So much of the conspiracy content from YouTube has gravitated over towards Reddit. And so it increased over there. So it's almost like a whack-a-mole type of thing where you try to fix the problem in one area and it just increases it in another. So progress, yes and no. And so you might also be asking yourself, well, isn't flat earth just a harmless conspiracy theory? Does it really matter what people believe the shape of the earth is? Well, and here again, I would say yes and no. I would say in the grand scheme, no, it doesn't matter if people believe the earth is a disc or the shape of a donut or a globe. What matters more is this kind of distrust in science, in scientific institutions, in political institutions, in your neighbors, your science teachers, and the media in general. And so I think this is what we see is similar processes with other, like anti-vaxxers or QAnon. There's this underlying factor here, right? That flat earth is just a symptom of a bigger problem. And we've seen since flat earth, we've seen the rise of more other different conspiracy theories that are more dangerous around different ideas, different things, political ideas, new technologies, right? Like 5G, around public figures. And so Dr. Fauci is not pleased with these conspiracy theories. And so what's going on here, right? So why are all these people falling for this kind of stuff? So this brings me back to my second P of how do people cognitively process conspiracy theories? And so one thing that may be happening when someone's processing conspiracy theories is what I kind of alluded to earlier, where I was kind of flagging you with those emotions, is the sense of discovery, the sense of confusion, amazement, surprise, wonder, this aha type of feeling. Is that when you are watching a conspiracy video and you discover that there's this hidden reality behind what you thought was reality, right? You may have this feeling of sense of whoa, like you've just discovered something new and amazing. On the other hand, you may have a sense of anger, right? You have this fight response to a threat detection. If you discover that there's this coalition that's organized to work against your interests, or that there's this cabal of elite pedophiles in the government, right? That may make you really angry. At the same time, you may have a combination of these emotions while you're watching it. You may feel the sense of awe when you first discover this conspiracy, but then it may transform into this kind of sense of anger. And so this is what I'm currently working on now. My current project is looking at the role of different emotions in the processing of conspiracy theories. And so why this matters is that awe is supposed to pull the mind outward to process incoming information. And so my current project that I'm working on is testing these few propositions. One, that conspiracy videos do elicit this sense of awe. That awe should elicit cognitive resource allocation to encoding incoming information, right? So you're allocating the resources of your brain to process the incoming information, which should reduce your ability to pull information from the mind to counter argue the message, right? So this should leave you more susceptible to the message. It should increase your perceived the strength of the argument. And so that's what I'm currently working on, as well as why, again, do people share information like this? And so my current project that I'm working on is looking at the role of emotions in the processing, as well as why people share this information. And so again, this brings me back to my 3 Ps, and the third one of propagating. So why, again, people like my dad share this stuff with everyone that they know. And so some of the research behind emotions and sharing is that political messages which evoke moral emotions related to moral outrage are shared the most by people across the political spectrum. Emotion eliciting Twitter messages are retweeted more often and more quickly than neutral ones. And so it may be that emotions are what are driving conspiracy diffusion. It may be the sense of moral outrage, right, that gets people to share, click, comment on stuff on social media, comment on the YouTube videos, share them. These are all drivers of diffusion. It leads to more sharing of this information. So this brings me to the big so what? You may be asking yourself, so who cares? Well, remember when I talked about why, otherwise smart people fall for things that are not necessarily true online, kind of like my dad? Well, this is a big deal, right? It matters that people believe these kinds of conspiracy theories because it lowers people's trust in scientific institutions, in science. It lowers their support for science, right? And so this is a growing problem for society, that people are believing this information, particularly during a pandemic, right? And an infodemic, where people are refusing to get vaccinated, refusing to wear masks, etc. And what we see is with fields like journalism and the media in particular tend to fall back on this. They have this tendency to revert to what seems intuitively true, is that if we just present more facts to the public, that they will understand them, that they will accept them, and that they will get on board, right? And we can change their minds if we just give them more facts. Well, we know this is not true. There's plenty of research, particularly in science communication, that talks about why just presenting more facts to the public doesn't always change people's minds. So this brings me back to the big whys and hows of conspiracy theories. And so I would love to tell you that we have a definitive answer of why conspiracy theories, spread, why people believe them, and how. But the honest answer in a nutshell is we don't really know. If we did, I would be studying something else, right? And so we're kind of constantly trying to figure this out. And so I'll just kind of go over some of what the research says and kind of a little bit what we know. And I'm going to do it using, again, my 3 Ps: people, processing, and propagating. So again, people, when I'm talking about people, individual differences or dispositional factors that leave people susceptible to conspiracy theories. One of the big ones is this, again, what I talked about earlier, is this conspiracy mentality. Now, we know that the best predictor for whether someone believes in a conspiracy or not is whether they believe in another conspiracy. So if someone believes in a conspiracy, they likely believe in more than one. And people who have this tendency to use conspiracy as a general explanation have what we call conspiracy mentality, conspiracy ideation. This is a general tendency to believe in conspiracies. And so this conspiracy mentality is associated with things like paranoia, delusional ideation, schizotypy, narcissism, and anxiety. So many are these individual dispositional factors that influence whether people are susceptible. And again, there's as well general hostility toward official narratives. The big five, one of the big five personality traits of openness to experience is also highly associated with conspiracy mentality. Political ideology, particularly the political extremes. So populism is also highly associated with conspiracy mentality. And then science illiteracy, right? So people who are low in science knowledge, particularly around areas like flat Earth, can be influential. And then religiosity or spirituality, the belief in the metaphysical tends to be associated with conspiracy thinking. And then we get to the second P of processing, right? So the cognitive emotional processing, we all have individual biases, right? Which also relates to the first P, but it influences how we process information. And so here, one of the big ones you may have heard is motivated reasoning. And so this is essentially just this unconscious tendency to fit the processing of incoming information to conclusions that fit some end goal, that suits some end goal, that you're processing information in a way that fits with what you already believed. And many of us have done this. We all do this. We click on the link, the first link that agrees with what we believe, and that's it. And so it takes a lot of training and effort to prevent and fight against this type of motivated reasoning that we all do. And so we also see this other biases like selective exposure, right? We pick and choose what kind of information we are exposed to. And this relates to echo chambers, right? Particularly these days with social media, we have divided ourselves into echo chambers, and we curate our own feeds that gives us mostly information that we already agree with, right? And we don't like the information that we don't agree with, so we don't pay attention to it. And this is a little bit of also what we call confirmation bias, right? We process information much more easily that jives with what we already believe, right? And we're much more critical about information that doesn't. And so, and again, this community reinforcement is related a little bit to echo chambers, but it's just this idea that if you are in this community that constantly reinforces your already held beliefs, it's more likely that you are going to be go deep into these kind of conspiracy beliefs. But also we see cultural affiliations, right? People's identity are wrapped up in people's beliefs. And this leads to emotional reactions to incoming content. And like, as I just described earlier, these kinds of emotions can influence how we process incoming information. And when we get to the last piece of propagating, right, it's the big social media problem. We know YouTube, right, plays a huge role in this, particularly with their algorithms. We just talked about how YouTube's recommendation feed essentially created a flat Earth community of people. And again, I mentioned YouTube's working on this, but it essentially means that YouTube has to decide to make less money, because the more people stay on their site, the more they watch 5-hour YouTube videos, right? The more ads they see, the more profit YouTube makes. And so it would take an intentional effort by YouTube to make less money to do this. And so I'm a little skeptical about, how much effort they're putting into modifying these algorithms, but it seems, for anecdotal, it seems to be working, right? And so again, YouTube creates these tendencies for people to go down rabbit holes because YouTube will recommend videos that people already like. So they give you topics of things that they think you will click on and watch. And this is not only with conspiracies, but this happens with other groups of people, like people who are misogynists, right? People who are men's rights advocates, right? They'll start watching things on YouTube, and YouTube will recommend to them more ideas and videos that are similar to men's rights stuff. And so they gravitate more into those communities. The same with like white supremacies or white nationalists, right? They all have this, YouTube has this tendency to create communities where they may not have been. And it's all because of the way their recommendation and their algorithms work. And so again, social media allows for this, it facilitates the sharing of information. Like my dad, it facilitates them sharing it with every single person that they know. And so I will kind of end on this new information or this new research that has essentially summarized who are the types of people who are typically conspiracy theorists. So people who have a little less education generally, people who are involved in groups that feel they should have more power and influence, people who belong to special political organizations or religious groups, people who tend to use their intuition or gut feeling to make decisions, people who tend to see connections in things that are not necessarily there, and as well as intention, right? We have this tendency to see intention or believe that our agents are involved when there's not necessarily an intentional agent behind something. And so people who tend to see these connections tend to see intention. People, again, like we talked about, a little more narcissistic, a little more paranoid, and as well, people who predominantly obtain most of their information from social media. And so with that, I thank you all for your attention and listening to me talk about the things that I'm interested in. And I thank you all, and I'll go ahead and open it up to questions.
I don't think I could ever be friends with someone who was a flat earther. I would just find them to be too ridiculous, and I would be looking for other crazy things that they believed in, and that would probably affect our friendship. So my question to you is, when your dad presented the Plandemic video, was that the first time he had done something like that? And how did that affect your relationship going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my dad does not tend to be conspiracy minded. So it's only since he's been on Facebook where he's been in this kind of echo chamber where he gets stuff shared to him by other people who are conspiracy minded, and he starts to question what he thought was true. And so some people may be more persuaded by these things than others, but I would say not until it was my dad got on social media very late. And so it wasn't until then that he started seeing these kinds of videos, and then he shares them with me, I guess, basically to get my thoughts on them, but he shared them with everybody that he knows, right? Did that answer your question? Was there a second part?
Well, maybe the second part is, did it affect your relationship moving forward?
Not so much, not that part. I take this approach of just the kind of personal approach to combating this kind of misinformation is kind of a humanistic approach, right? It's just compassion, understanding, of always being there and being able to exchange ideas, question why do you believe this is true, and things like that. And so I use this kind of analogy of if the Earth was to be if a giant meteor was about to hit the Earth, right? The worst possible solution, or the Hollywood solution, is to send up a team of like what's his name, Bruce Willis, to drill and blow up the whole thing, right? We know that from science, if we do something like that, that's just going to blow up in our faces, right? It's all going to come raining down on us and cause a bigger explosion. So if you attack people with their beliefs, right, if you cause this big explosion, it's just going to blow up in your face. My approach is this kind of a gentle nudging approach. And so what we know now in science, if we were to take a different approach with an incoming meteor, just put another gravitational body out there with it and just gently nudge it out of the direction of the Earth, right, we can save ourselves. And so this is the kind of approach that I take with people like my dad or my cousins who have this kind of proclivity to believe these things, is to just always be there, continue to be compassionate, understanding, exchange ideas with them. And like I said earlier, just start questioning them and why they think what they think is true, why they believe it, and things like that.
Two things. One is there's a popularizer of science. She's a theoretical physicist named Sabine Hassenfelter, and she's done a video on flat earthers. And she the conclusion that she came up with was that these people are scientists in a way. However, there's one part of science they don't seem to get. They seem to only want to focus on things that they've experienced themselves, or that they, yeah, that's basically it. They just say, if I haven't seen it, if I can't experience it personally, then I'm gonna rule it out. So, and you know, she goes on and argues why that's erroneous, the way their logic is working. Of course, they're relying on all kinds of things they haven't experienced personally. So I was wondering how you thought about that, but also this idea of big flat Earth or big conspiracy. You know, is somebody out there benefiting from this? And you brought up YouTube, for example. I mean, they're in essence counteracting their own benefit by changing their algorithms basically to push this away. There are people who could benefit from this, and especially politicians, and some of us would argue some politicians do benefit from some of these conspiracies. Are there these, you know, you told us why people personally share them. How about outside organizations that are actually pushing them to be shared for their own benefits?
Yeah, so I agree. There's likely organizations that are pushing conspiracy theories for one reason or the other, and they're not necessarily consigned to any political direction, right? There's conspiracy theorists on the right and left. But yeah, there may be bigger motives, right, to do things like that. There are groups like wellness groups or anti-vax groups, right, that intentionally share this kind of misinformation. But to go back to your previous point on the this kind of empiricism, flat earthers have this kind of staunch form of empiricism where they only believe what they see with their own two eyes, right? And so if they can't experience it personally, it's up for question, right? I'm not gonna believe it. And the same with photos or videos, because it's digital, it's too easily manipulated, right? And so they don't hold any kind of weight to that, even though they believe other conspiracy theorists who are doing experiments on YouTube and they watch those videos, right? So there is this kind of sense of this staunch empiricism, which is it kind of just rejects scientific theory generally and just only believes what you see with your two eyes. And so they do have this kind of sense of curiosity about science. They don't reject science per se. They're using science to try to answer their questions. But what they're missing is this kind of what we do in science is try to disprove our beliefs, right? And so here, what we see, particularly if you've seen the documentary on Netflix called Beyond the Curve, the documentary ends with flat earthers running an experiment where they use lasers and the level of the water And it turns out that they prove themselves wrong. Like their experiment does not show them what they expected. It shows the round earth, right? But they then decide that there's something wrong with the instrumentation that they're using, right? So they start, again, they use this kind of motivated reasoning. There must be something wrong with the experiment, right? Because it didn't produce the conclusions that we wanted. So yes, there is this kind of appreciation for science. They're actually using science. They're just not using it in the right way that we normally do. Scientific method.
A couple of our members typed the same thing in the chat, Polly and Kathy Humble. They want an example of a science sounding argument for conspiracies.
Sure. So with flat earth particularly, it's very amenable to science. Like, so they'll use this argument that there's no curvature, that there's supposed to be 8 inches per mile squared curvature, but you don't see it on the horizon, and that it's never been measured, which is obviously not true. But they use these kinds of arguments, and that they'll say things like water always seeks its level. And so if water is seeking a level in the ocean, it's impossible for it to curve around, right? So it's always got to be flat. So this is their reasoning for why the earth is one of them, why the earth is flat. And so as well, they'll say things like the curve always raises to eye level, or the horizon always raises to eye level, which means it can't be flat, which don't let me try to explain that to you. But so those are just kind of few examples of that. And they'll say things like gravity is only density and buoyancy, right? So gravity is a hard thing to explain in a flat earth model. And so there's different explanations for what gravity is in the flat earth world. Some of them say it's just density, right? So if you drop an object, because it's denser than the air, it falls. Has nothing to do with the shape of the earth and the gravity pulling to the center. But the other flat earthers, so like the Flat Earth Society is a different group of flat earthers who think that the earth is a disk flying upwards through space. And that's what's pulling everybody down to the disk. And so gravity is not what we think it is. It's just an acceleration upward, right? And so the earth is constantly accelerating upward and pushing everything down to the earth. So those are just kind of some of the scientific sounding arguments. And if you're not familiar with science, if you're not, very science literate, some of them may sound compelling to you. You're like, wait a minute, why don't I feel the earth spinning, right? Shouldn't I feel like at least something, right? If the earth is spinning at 1,000 something miles an hour, and I'm just standing here and don't feel anything, how does that make sense, right? And so there's a little bit of this intuitive sense that it just doesn't make sense intuitively, right? It doesn't feel right in the gut, so it can't be right. And so, yeah.
There's another thing besides a conspiracy that kind of looks like one. We have the concept now of the perfect storm. In a perfect storm, all the pieces fit together to cause some strange outcome. I'll go through a few of these that maybe. How do you deal with those as opposed to real conspiracies? Does the existence of these two things make your job a little bit harder? Well, I think at this point we don't know whether Donald Trump was a conspiracy or a perfect storm. We know that the financial crisis of 2007, 2008 was a financial storm where everybody acted as if they were all trying to ruin the economy, but if everybody was perfectly dumb. We have the anti-communist paranoia in the United States in the 1950s and also in the 1920s, perfect storm. We have the domination of capitalism in the United States, arose out of factors in the 19th century that were a perfect storm. It was good for us then, it's probably not quite so good for us now. We have the whole domination of Western civilization for 1,000 years by a combination of nobles and churchmen. Was that a conspiracy or is that a perfect storm? I don't know, but how do you decide what you're dealing with? How do you, when you have so many pieces that all fit together to lock up the whole world through self-interest, how do you distinguish that from a conspiracy?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the way they usually define the conspiracy is a group of people who are working together for some sort of malevolent purpose, right? Some sort of grand scheme or some, again, malevolent purpose. And so distinguishing them is very hard, like you say. That complicates matters because real conspiracies exist, right? Watergate happened, which was a conspiracy. These bigger perfect storms, like you're mentioning, these things happen in the real world. So it gives conspiracy theorists ammunition for their arguments. They're saying, you see, aha, this is real, conspiracies exist. This, adds weight to our argument why our conspiracy is real, right? And so it does make my job complicated, especially things like the recent Trump issue with Russia, right? Was it a conspiracy? Was it just a big, was it a left-wing conspiracy that people just, cooked up out of nowhere? Or was there potentially something possibly to it, right? That may not be as big as what they made it out to be. But so there's varying degrees of conspiracy, and some are more outrageous and ridiculous than others, like flat Earth. But some, like Watergate, for example, are very real and come from the highest levels of power. And so yeah, I appreciate that question. It complicates my life a little bit.
Over a question from Jill, my apologies, but she asked, can you give us some examples of conspiracies from the left?
Oh, sure. Yeah, the Trump Russia one is a good example. Other ones usually generally relate to industry. So people on the left are very suspicious of big organizations and corporations. And so as well as industries like big pharma, for example. And so a lot of the big pharma conspiracy theories kind of originate on the left. Other like big corporate conspiracy theories tend to be on the left. The 9/11 conspiracy theory is mostly from people on the left. That's where flat Earth is kind of interesting, because flat Earth is a topic that's disassociated from the political partisanship that we see with a lot of misinformation. And so I think that understanding why people believe such far-fetched things like flat Earth can help us understand why everyday people reject mainstream scientific findings.
Helen's question, is there any evidence that as people age and they may suffer some cognitive deficits, are they more susceptible to conspiracy theories?
That's a good question. I don't think that there's been any strong associations with age and conspiracy thinking. I don't think so. In the same way with gender, there doesn't seem to be a strong gender difference between men and women on who's more conspiracy oriented than the other. And the same with age. I think you don't have to be in cognitive decline to see connections everywhere, right? Or to perceive intentional agency where there's none, right? These things can happen at a very young age, or they can happen at an old age. So I don't think that there's necessarily something specific about older people in conspiracy thinking.
Gretchen has a question.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I'm wondering if you have done comparisons cross-culturally. I'm wondering if you would compare with the United States high technology and I think a pretty high level of social strain.
I think what you were asking is, are there differences between cultures in conspiracy thinking? Is that right?
Yes. Yes, and if you're looking at high technology and high satisfaction societies compared with societies high technology and more social strain, if they're because I suspect that the big motivator for this is social discomfort.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. We do see similar patterns of conspiracy thinking among those kinds of people. So the last slide that I showed you, those tend to be similarities across cultures. In the same sense, people who come from cultures where there is a more authoritarian government and less trust in what the media is telling you, you tend to have higher levels of conspiracy. So like in the Middle East, for example, there's a high prevalence of conspiracy ideation in the Middle East. You see this anti-Semitism as well in the Middle East, and that's very associated with conspiracy thinking. As far as technology, I don't know the answer to that. So if a society is high in technology, there's this tendency for them to be using social media, and we know that social media creates these kind of echo chambers, right? That reinforces people's beliefs. But the same way in people in less technologically advanced societies probably are less able to spread conspiracy theories as far and as fast as they can in technologically advanced societies. But I don't know that there's this sense of distrust, but also kind of angst. This paranoia, angst, less satisfaction with life, I think is kind of what you're getting at. It does have this kind of tendency to promote these kinds of conspiracy thinkers. And you think that someone's working against your interest and that you should have more of a voice than you actually do. I hope that answered your question.
And I think that kind of relates to a comment that Constance had. They wrote, is there evidence that people who believe in conspiracy theories feel more victimized by society?
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Sounds good. Now I'll take a question from Jeff Strang.
Yeah, thanks. I'm thinking of the openness to experience part of this. And I know the question was raised about older people that might be in cognitive decline. But I'm thinking of younger people. Are younger people more open to believing in conspiracy theories? And I think also of my own evolution from agnostic to atheist. When I was younger, I was told all these things from elders, and I didn't have enough experience, so I didn't disbelieve those things, but I just would listen and try to test them if I could. And then also I'm thinking about entertainment. Are people who like to be entertained more susceptible to believing in conspiracy theories?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there is this sense of some people experience this sense of joy and play when they uptake conspiracy theories. So what are some good examples? So like the Da Vinci Code, for example, is a good example of conspiracy where people enjoy like the discovery of putting together the puzzle pieces. And so there is this sense of enjoyment in some sense to some conspiracy theories. As far as the age goes, I think, again, I don't think there's strong differences in age between people believing conspiracy theories, but what we found is, YouGov did a poll a few years ago about flat Earth, and they found that a solid 2 to 3% of the population firmly believes that the Earth is flat. And majority of those people tend to be younger. So the younger, even a higher percentage, question what the shape of the Earth is. So they're unsure if it's round or flat. And so a lot of those people are of a younger age. And so there may be this kind of tendency to, I guess, just more questioning things at a younger age that may lead you down those kinds of rabbit holes.
So Lawrence had a comment in the chat. He said, do you have any comments on the Kennedy conspiratory theories? And he says, not absolutely nutty, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I kind of fall within the mainstream of that. It was Oswald in the book depository. So I have a feeling he was the lone gunman. I don't have strong feelings on that conspiracy theory. It is one of the more popular conspiracy theories. So a good maybe half of the country believes that there was some sort of conspiracy around the Kennedy assassination, but that's also has to do with popular media, right? There's been movies around it, and it's one of the most widely known conspiracy theories. So I don't have strong feelings on it. I kind of agree with the conventional wisdom.
So going back to the Flat Earth Society for one moment, Jim and Kay writes, for the people that believe in the flat Earth, what is the Earth like on the other side, the uninhabited part?
So that's a good question. So there's different views in the flat Earth community about what the actual shape of the Earth is. I think there's more consensus that it's not a spinning ball than it is a flat disk, or that is an infinite plane. So some people believe that it's just a disk that is surrounded by an ice wall. Others believe that there's lands beyond the ice wall that the government is hiding from us, where potential other civilizations live. And so, yeah, so there's differences in the community about who believes what.
So I have another question that relates to Al's question a little bit. When you have a society that is very willing to believe in conspiracy theories, isn't there a danger and a risk that it does allow powerful people or large organizations to more easily take power?
So in societies where people tend to believe in conspiracy theories, it may have the opposite effect. It may produce this backlash of where people are inclined to believe that there's a conspiracy going on, and they may fight against it. But usually in those kinds of societies, right, they don't have the means to fight against the government. So yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. That's a good question.
I guess what I mean by that is, to me, and I think most people in our membership would say that people in the Trump campaign and the Russians did have a major impact on the 2016 election. And that, what I believe is more science and information based, allowed the other side in 2020 to have more credibility to the stop the steal argument. That's kind of what I mean. And if you could maybe comment on that.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that the U.S. as a society is more inclined to believe in conspiracy theories, but we have seen some evidence that people on the right tend to use more intuitive thinking sometimes, and so that may lead to conspiracy thinking. But again, there's conspiracy thinking across the aisle. But yeah, so having people in the highest forms of power or the highest levels of power pushing these conspiracy theories can have dangerous consequences, like we've seen on January 6th. So yeah, so I mean, again, real conspiracy theories or real conspiracies exist, and they can be, like we say with the election, it can be disseminated from the highest forms of power, and even on some mainstream news outlets like Fox News, for example, or Newsmax or OANN, right? They were known for like diffusing those conspiracy theories to their big audiences. So yeah, so that's a big problem.
Chaz has an interesting comment in the chat. They write, I have several ex-friends who are members of the Flat Earth Society because I used to live around the corner from McGuire's restaurant in Pensacola, Florida. The society headquarters is in their conference room.
So can I add to that?
Sure.
Oh, so the people who are in that group are pillars of society in Pensacola. The owner of McGuire's restaurant is world renowned. You have to wait in line to get in there, and it's actually a pretty good restaurant. But the owner, I mean, he's a really good businessman, very wealthy. Another person is an attorney that is very powerful. I don't know if he's well respected. My girlfriend was charged with a DUI, and he showed up. He represented her, got her off of the DUI, and he showed up in his bathrobe. So, but I can't believe that these people actually believe that the Earth is flat. I think they started it as a gag. They just don't seem that way. They tend to be really Trump people. One of them has in his office, he's got a cardboard statue of, you know about that one, that Trump thing. But it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, so there's a tendency for Trump supporters, particularly some people on the right, to be trolls, and particularly in the flat Earth community, there may be some of those people who are simply just trolling. Some of the earlier flat Earth arguments were done by people who were specifically trolling, that they were people who were already or more educated in physics and stuff like that, and so they were online just for, pardon the language, shits and giggles. They were arguing for flat Earth just for the fun of it, just to see if they could have these arguments with people, win these arguments, knowing what they know about the shape. And they know the Earth is round, but they're arguing that it's flat anyway. And so there's kind of this sense of trolling. Now, I don't know that these people you're referring to are specifically trolling. A lot of, many of the flat earthers I spoke to deeply, sincerely believe that the Earth is flat. And again, many of it is wrapped up in identity. But yeah, and this goes again to the differences of education levels, of economic status, socioeconomic status. It ranges, right? There were engineers and people with master's degrees who were flat earthers. There are wealthy people who are flat earthers. So there's not necessarily anything of becoming successful that prevents you from going down those same kind of rabbit holes.
And it's fitting that our last question of the morning comes from the technical wizard of our Zoom calls and our president, Mr. David DiNucci.
My question is, do you think this might all be helping us out? That is, you mentioned this trolling idea that people were trying to win arguments that they knew they were wrong, but they were going to win them anyway, that the Earth is flat. Could that just be testing our abilities to convey science properly through society and help us to improve our scientific arguments and improve the way education works? And what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, that the overall result will be positive.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer. So I think that there's some benefit in doing that. So there's always benefits of questioning, the mainstream narrative, particularly with topics like, the shape of the Earth is hard to argue that it's benefit to argue that it's flat, but things like climate change, for example, right? There's always room for areas of disagreement, for pushback. And so I think in any areas of science, I think it's healthy to have that kind of pushback and exchange of ideas. But I think with particularly with the trolling and the way we've seen what happened with it, it is actually produced, right? It actually convinced more people that the earth was flat by having these smart people arguing their arguments for the flat earth. So I think it entrenches people further when they can point to people with degrees and experts who are making these arguments that they don't know whether or not they're trolling or not. You see, here's this engineer who said the earth's flat. And so I think there's yes and no.
Alex, this was incredibly informative. We really loved spending the morning with you. Thank you so much. Just as a final personal question, when do you anticipate defending your dissertation?
Good question. So I'm defending my proposal here in the next couple of weeks, soon as the finals end. And then I should be defending the whole thing by summer and graduating by summer. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure meeting all of you and speaking with you all today.
Thank